Hello, my good friends. Hello, James Malone.
Hello.
Um, Side note, we had some technical problems, so we had an event planned on LinkedIn where everyone is waiting for us, but we are going live on this side channel because things not don't always work as they should. So I'm going to check right now LinkedIn to see who is still on the other event, and I'm going to tell them to join us here. How are you doing, James? While I
I'm
do
doing
this, please,
excellent.
yes,
I'm
please,
doing great.
while I fix these technical problems, please tell to the audience how awesome you are and why we're working together at Snowflake. And I'll be
No
back in
pressure.
1 second with everyone.
Just talk about yourself. Uh,
Yes.
everybody loves doing that, right? Yeah. Hi, I'm James. I lead product for storage and ingest and streaming and orchestration telemetry at Snowflake. Overall, the goal of my team is to make it very easy to connect Snowflake with data wherever it is, in whatever format it is. No data is too big, no data is too small. We want Snowflake to be usable for whatever data you have, wherever it is. Uh,
Mhm.
Previously worked with Felipe at Google. I'm very happy to work with him again. So it's fun. We're having a lot of fun here.
Yes, we are having a lot of fun here, and oh, we we have the video live right now, but it says that it's a startup challenge. But so I need to change the title because I just went live with this title. We are going to change
Oh, I can
this.
win up to $1 million. Oh, this is excellent.
Yes. I'm so sorry. Let's do this for anyone watching us right now. I'm going to turn this stream off, and I'm going to change. Oh, well, you know what? We are live right now. Let's do this. We have 160 people on LinkedIn. We are going to change the title later. I'm sorry for the title. We are going to talk about Apache Iceberg. Let me see if I can change the title on LinkedIn right now live.
We'll do it live.
Apache Iceberg and Apache Iceberg and storage at Snowflake.
I was going to
Sorry,
say there's
people,
people from
for
all
this.
over. This is great. Hello to everyone. There's everyone
Yes,
spanning the planet here. This is pretty exciting.
I know it's super exciting to see people here. Hopefully, someone will update the event with the current URL. And I'm going to say hi to James. As you see,
Hello.
I used to work together with James at Google. Now we work together at Snowflake. And I see how James loves open source.
Hmm.
You are really big on the open source ecosystem. And also, you love storage.
Yeah, I
And
do.
my
Yeah,
first question to you is, why is storage exciting?
yeah. Good question. Well, unless you store data, it's very hard to work with data. And not to get too philosophical, but working with data is not a new problem. Humans have been working with data for a really long time. So a lot of challenges in data are cyclical. They're based on whatever our current ability is, whatever our current technical ability is. We've reached a really interesting point where we can store far more information than we could conceivably use. So storage is a really interesting and challenging space right now because we have to be able to store infinitely, but also make it very easy for people to get actionable information from the vast amounts of data that we are able to collect now. And that's just an exciting space to hang out. It's an exciting space to be in right now.
It is exciting. Like, let me start with this diagram that you recently shared in a blog post, and that will let us go through this whole
Cool.
story. Share screen and my window. I had everything prepared, and then we had technical problems. But we are here. We are live. I'm live from San Francisco. James, you are in.
I'm in Seattle.
You are in Seattle, and we have people from all over the world joining us, as you see, Bangalore, India, okay. And we're ready for your live questions about storage, about Iceberg, about external tables. So let's look at this diagram for 1 second.
Yep.
And you authored this diagram. We're talking about Snowflake table types.
Yeah.
And on the right, I see the standard Snowflake tables, like That's what people have been using most of the time.
Mhm.
But to the left, I see three options. Can you tell me more about these three options for
Yeah.
data?
So the goal is to give you, the customer, choice to pick whatever works for you. The thing that my team and I have a few simple principles that we design around. And one of the principles is we want our technology to match whatever storage pattern, data architecture pattern works for you. We don't want to be overly prescriptive and say, this is the only thing that works for you. Because organizations are different, use cases are different, people are different, and data is different. So coming to every problem with a one size fits all solution, in my opinion, doesn't work. So what we've done is we've created a series of products which they layer on additional functionality inside of Snowflake with each successive layer. So with external tables, it allows you to use Snowflake with data in place wherever it happens to be. We'll be able to query the data. You get limited governance on the data. You can do things like share the data. So you get some really good Snowflake functionality, but we're not moving the data. It's all in place. We have two variants of external tables now. One is external tables on cloud providers, and we also just recently announced support for external tables against anything that has an S3 API. And I think you know a little bit about this. I think you played with it too. You can put an S3 API on anything from like a Raspberry Pi, which it sound familiar, to large storage arrays that happen to be on premise, which allows you to use Snowflake with data in place kind of inside the cloud and now outside of the cloud. With Iceberg tables, which we've recently launched, it's a brand new table type inside of Snowflake. And the goal is to use open formats. So Parquet is the data format, Iceberg is the table format, and get as close to our native Snowflake table as we can while still using open standards and open source. So the goal is to give that spectrum from leave data in place, maybe on-prem, up through our native Snowflake storage, which we do see as the most secure and fastest storage mechanism that you can use in a data platform.
Nice. Wow, that's such a huge range. Uh, if I could summarize it in 2 words, is giving customers choice.
Yeah.
They can choose where they want their data to be stored and what makes more sense in their architecture. And I want to go into Apache Iceberg. I'm sure people have a lot of Apache Iceberg questions, but
Yeah.
first, let's talk about these new S3 compatible tables that you are saying S3 compatible, but it's not S3. It's
No.
tables anywhere. It's tables on premise. It's tables like.
Yeah.
Tell me a little more of who is using this and how they're using it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so the S3 API is arguably just a standard for working with object stores now. So several vendors, both hardware and software vendors, have taken the S3 API and they've layered on the S3 API onto storage devices, onto just software, pieces of software. So what we've done is we've developed the ability for Snowflake to work with those APIs that emulate S3 but aren't actually S3, and we will treat them as S3. So if you have, say, a Dell or Pure Storage or Hitachi or Samsung device on premise, or you are using MinIO on a laptop on your desk, all of those devices can expose what looks to most things like a standard S3 API. And so we've developed the ability for Snowflake to connect with those and treat them as S3, which allows all of our external table functionality, so queries, data sharing, governance, replication, to work against those S3-like APIs. And it opens up a lot of possibilities. And where we're seeing a lot of interest for these is with customers who have hard data storage or data residency requirements. So banks, insurance providers, government agencies, where they're required to keep data in a very specific place, it allows you to load and unload data into Snowflake from that specific storage device in that specific place. We also see a lot of customers who are maybe do things like IoT or manufacturing, where they have on-premise data stores because latency is really critical, but they want to use Snowflake to read and work with that data without having to move some of their most sensitive data sets to cloud.
Yes. So I have my data center. Anything in my own physical data center, in my own servers, can be a Snowflake table, can be queried in real time, as if it was a normal Snowflake table. Will just be a little slower because we have the
Yeah.
internet in between, but it's there. People can start their ELT,
Yeah.
ETL processes from anywhere.
Yes.
And, and that's a fun project I'm waiting for someone to do. Maybe it will be me, just putting an S3 API on a Raspberry Pi. And then I will have a handheld Snowflake table that can be
Mhm.
queried in real time by Snowflake from the cloud into any device or data center. That's
Yeah.
magic.
If anybody's familiar with TrueNAS, I've actually tested it against TrueNAS, against the NAS device I have in a closet in my house. And I was able to connect Snowflake with literally my home storage device, which was pretty cool.
Oh, I want to query your home storage. I know you
Yeah.
take a lot of
I
star
was doing
pictures.
unstructured data processing. It was pretty fun.
Yes, we need to do a demo with that. But now let's move from external storage to this iceberg concept because
Yes.
a lot of people have Parquet files, Arbor files. How is Iceberg playing this? What is Apache Iceberg?
Good question. Okay, so Iceberg is a table format. And I'll start by walking through what a table format is and why it's useful, just so we can level set. So say you have, my canonical example is say you have 1,000 Parquet files in a directory somewhere. Those Parquet files can describe what's in the file. So here's the data that might be in this one Parquet file. But if you use a tool like Snowflake or Trino to go work with those files, you don't necessarily know, are all of these files in one table, or do I have 1,000 different tables represented with one file each? Or maybe it's one table, but it's 3 years worth of data over this table, and the schema's changed over time. What a table format can do is basically group files to a specific table definition at a point in time that allows you ACID compliance. In the case of Iceberg, it allows you schema evolution and time travel and a whole lot of things that you will want on top of a table. So it's that missing link between a bunch of data and then the metadata about a table that allows you to use the table for high performance analytics. Iceberg is one of several table formats. We think Iceberg is really the table format that we see being most successful in the long term based on its velocity, based on its customer adoption, based on its commercial adoption, based on its feature growth over time. I think I often get asked what's the killer feature of Iceberg? That's probably one of the most common questions that I get from customers. I think the killer feature, putting myself in the place of a customer, and I do view everything through a customer lens, is Iceberg is engine agnostic. Iceberg is designed to give you all of the benefit without locking your hands on choosing a specific processing engine. And from a customer standpoint, that's hugely beneficial because it gives you the flexibility to choose what tool works for a particular job.
Yes. Yeah, I see we have this blog post from January when you announce that this is you, all you expanding the data cloud with Apache Iceberg. That's when we announce our
Yep.
big decision. But now the most recent one from July is 5 compelling reasons to choose
Mhm.
Apache Iceberg.
Yep.
So as you were telling me, first, it's a table format. It's a way of understanding these are not just Parquet files. These are tables, they make sense, these are their version, they have a schema. And Snowflake is able to, instead of just taking these files, is taking these tables.
Mhm.
And as they're in Apache Iceberg, you can use it not only in Snowflake, you can use them on different projects. Like
Yeah.
it's an open source project with a lot of adoption from different players.
Mhm.
Um, and yep, so you have table formats on Iceberg. What are the problems that the table formats solve? And we were talking me, you were telling me about these compelling reasons to use it. Of course, performance, interpretability, ease of use, and now you're going to give me compelling reasons to choose Iceberg.
Yep.
So let's talk about this clean break from the past.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in general, prior attempts to solve this problem, and there's been explicit attempts. So things like Apache Hoodie are kind of implicit attempts like Hive.
Mhm.
One of the nice things about Iceberg is it's a clean sheet design that's looking at how table formats can work. And it doesn't, unlike other table formats, there aren't hard dependencies on things like Hive. The authors of Iceberg, and specifically it was a Netflix project, they decided to design from the ground up a clean sheet design. And there's a lot of benefit to that because it means that your overall technical stack is both cleaner and also less tied to the past. if you're using a project, and this is one of, as much as I love open source, this is one of the risks. You start using something, you don't necessarily know upfront what your full dependency chain or your full dependency tree is. Iceberg is really nice because you're not having to go import, legacy 10-year-old, 15-year-old stuff in your project to go use something that is brand new to you today.
Yeah, so there is a conscious decision of we've tried different stuff. Now with Apache Iceberg, we're going to get it right.
Yep.
And it started at one particular company, and then it grew in adoption. How's that story?
Yeah. So we took a strategic bet. We
Mhm.
Snowflake took a strategic bet on Iceberg about a year ago. And we foresaw, based on its engine agnosticism, its high performance, and its adaptability, that it would be probably the table format that most people will be interested in the long term. In the past year, there's been a number of commercial vendors, both large cloud vendors and also independent software as a service vendors that have added first-class support for Iceberg, including Snowflake. So if you're a customer, you now have multiple engines to choose from to go work with Iceberg data. So if you're looking at picking a table format, it's a great choice because you do have options. And one of the concerns that some customers have, especially in the open source space, is how am I going to be, am I going to be locked in? How might this tie my hands? Iceberg offers you the lowest sort of hand tying, or the lowest likelihood of having your hands tied in the future, which from a customer point of view, I think is a really good thing.
Yes. And yeah, sorry for mispronouncing, Akanksha Srivastava is asking, why choose Iceberg over other options? And I like how this blog post goes straight to that. Like,
Yeah.
yep, we have the strategic decision from Snowflake because it's widely adopted. It's clean, like as Shen says, also live. We are getting rid of the dependency tree of old decisions. Let's go through these three next points. Engine and file format agnostic from the ground up, well run up open source, is new ideas and help. So let's.
Yeah. So there's, in terms of I've mentioned Iceberg is engine agnostic. Iceberg also supports multiple file types. So you have Parquet, Avro, and ORC. With our first Iceberg support, we have chosen to focus on Parquet because the majority of customer data is in Parquet. But one of the nice things about Iceberg is it's designed with that flexibility to work with additional file types, which we think is actually really great. We actually have plans to introduce other file types to be supported in Iceberg because there's a lot of utility there. So it's very flexible. We see it as being essentially a table format for potentially all of your data, which from a design point of view is really great. The project is well-run open source. So just because code is on GitHub doesn't necessarily mean that it's well-run open source. The code might be on GitHub, and that's great. You can see the code on GitHub. Well-run open source has a community that's really transparent. It also means that you know exactly who's in charge. So if there's a contentious issue, you know who actually has the right to vote and decide on the issue. All of the decisions are made publicly. There's a wide group of people that are actively contributing to the project. Iceberg itself is part of the Apache Software Foundation, and I will express I'm slightly biased because I helped start an Apache project, and I love Apache projects. The Apache Software Foundation has well-documented processes for everything. They've had a lot of experience. There's a number of projects. I think it's over 100 some Apache projects. So it's a very mechanical and it's well-run. Everything is hyper-transparent. Not all projects are like that. Some projects go to great length to kind of hide who's in charge and who's contributing. Iceberg is basically the opposite. And from an open source standpoint, I think that's something to be really commended. As an example of this, the latest Iceberg release, 0.14, now supports Spark 3.3. As far as I know, it's the first table format to support Spark 3.3. Where did the Spark 3.3 support come from? It came from the AWS EMR team. So I have to give them props for doing that. But it's a good example of how the inclusivity and the diversity of Iceberg is actually helping the project move really fast and benefit everyone.
Yeah, I love how this is a strategic decision for people. Like, if I'm a company contributing to Iceberg or an alternative, as a company contributing, I see that Iceberg is a better place to have multiple companies collaborating. And it's
Yep.
not just because you're saying it, it's because you're watching it. You're seeing it in real time, how many companies are contributing to Iceberg. And this might be strategic to the companies contributing, but then the benefit that the users get is that they get these multiple companies. In this example, the Iceberg support for the latest Spark,
Yeah.
it came from Amazon.
Yeah.
And they have Iceberg is giving all of us this great place to contribute ideas. And this comes to the next point here, spawning new ideas and help. Tell me
Yeah.
more about this.
Yeah, good question. I will quickly say there's a few questions on how to get started with Iceberg I see in the chat.
Yes,
My
Sachin is
advice,
asking.
if you go to the Iceberg website, there's Slack channels, there's public discussions. Just plug into the Slack channel and start looking through the docs. The Slack community on Iceberg is awesome. They're super friendly. It's also a technical who's who of large players in the tech industry. So it's actually a really cool place to just hang out. You see a lot of really cool thinking and collaboration on their Slack. New ideas. So I will point again to the Iceberg, the latest release, 0.14.0. There's, for the past couple of quarters, I think, there's been a Git-like project called Nessie that's been a good example of how Iceberg is starting to spawn new ideas. The latest release also has more information about Puffin, which is kind of you can think of it as kind of like a secondary index of sorts. Which is actually really interesting. It's the Iceberg project itself is starting to spawn sub-projects or related projects to solve really tricky and difficult problems, but to do it in open source. And that's, I think, really exciting to see. Iceberg itself also now has an open REST metadata API to try and finally replace things like Hive. So the Iceberg project itself is starting to spawn innovation in other areas of open source that I think honestly are desperately needed. And that's really awesome to see, wearing my open source hat.
Yes. Yeah. Now, before we go a little bit deeper into these projects and into the next point, I want to reply to Abdullah, who is asking, is there a demo available for Iceberg and Snowflake?
Yes, there is. There's a YouTube video that I have to give credit to Plita, who's one of the awesome engineers, principal engineer at Snowflake, who was instrumental in helping us launch Iceberg tables. And she gives a demo of Iceberg tables. I would say in that demo, there's a few things to note in that demo that speak to why our Iceberg support is really strategic for Snowflake. We show in that video things like multi-table transactions that other engines just can't do. And Snowflake does that out of the box. And we can do that with Iceberg out of the box. So it shows how our engine is unique, even in the private preview. We also show how things like dynamic data masking just work out of the box. So the features that you know and love in Snowflake work transparently with Iceberg tables, which those are two very kind of subtle things in the demo, but I think they're really important to call out because they are a good indication of where we're going with Iceberg tables.
That's awesome. We need to watch this demo as soon as we're done with it. And Satin, of course, is asking about, you're mentioning that some parts of this are private preview. Iceberg itself, it's open to the world. The private preview part is what's happening inside Snowflake to support all of these features. Not only as we can read Iceberg tables, but we can work with them. Please tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so there's two Iceberg projects at Snowflake. One is Iceberg external tables, which allows you to read an Iceberg table as an external table. In that case, we assume something else is the metastore, something else is the system of record, and you want Snowflake to just read the table. Maybe you want to share the Iceberg table. It's really great for when something else is generating and maintaining the Iceberg table, and you want to just plug Snowflake into it. The other thing that we've launched is our brand new table type based entirely around Iceberg. And this gives you similar performance to Snowflake native tables. By GA, we'll have basically parity with Snowflake table features and Iceberg table features. So it'll give you things that you can use on top of Snowflake tables, also on top of Iceberg tables. And that's intended to give people as close as to a native Snowflake table experience as we can give you without breaking Iceberg or Parquet. It's very important to us that we're not breaking the open spec. So we're going to try and get as close as we can to that native Snowflake experience, but be very mindful that we're not going to just do things in open source and just try and have our own way. That's in my opinion not how open source should work.
Yes, and just a little point as Satin is asking if he finds bugs, where would he go? We have here a page just dedicated to Apache Iceberg support
Yeah.
and how to go deeper into this, either with external tables or with Iceberg tables inside the Snowflake. And that's the little distinction of, am I reading Iceberg generated somewhere else, or is Snowflake completely managing these tables to with all the features? And as we need to start closing, let's talk about Iceberg includes features that are paid in other table formats.
Yeah. So this also ties back to the fourth point. So Iceberg is starting to spawn ideas that are usually proprietary paid features in other engines and other table formats. Iceberg itself is also a table format that has been designed by a really diverse community. It's not kind of just one company throwing stuff over the wall at their own discretion. And that means that when there's a problem to solve, the Iceberg community will go and solve that problem. It's not dependent on kind of one group deciding when they might or might not, open source things or trying to open source things twice or what have you. So the interesting thing with Iceberg is, you see this, Puffin's a great example. If you're kind of curious on where Iceberg is going on this front, you can even go into a search engine and just search for Puffin Iceberg. It's a good example of where speed and performance is something that people want from table formats. Iceberg is starting to solve that problem in open source, and you don't see that with other table formats. And I think that's a really important point because it means you know exactly what's open and what's not open. And from the Snowflake standpoint, we want to be very clear on what's open and what's not open. And Iceberg makes it very clear that as far as Iceberg is concerned, things are open, and then you can have private implementations of them.
Yes. And as you mentioned, performance and cost are always important. And we have two live questions. One is about performance with large Parquet files and also storage cost.
Good question. So for both external tables, starting with the storage cost, both external tables and Iceberg tables use customer supplied storage. So you pay the cloud provider directly. There's no Snowflake storage cost, which for our Iceberg native tables is actually, I think, a cool benefit for customers who want to just pay the cloud provider directly. In terms of performance, external tables have lower performance than native Snowflake tables because they're a jack of all trades, master of none. Like we can support, I think it's now 6 file types. There's a question on whether we'll support more. The answer is probably yes in the fullness of time, but we don't know. The table could be the file could be 2 kilobytes or 2 gigabytes. So performance is designed to be as best as we can get, assuming that we know nothing about the file, but we're always trying to make it better. Iceberg tables, so our native Iceberg tables, you'll see performance that is very similar to Snowflake native tables. For customers who are part of our private preview, it's my full expectation they're going to go run TCP/DS or other benchmarks, and they'll be able to see, how good the performance is. It's very good.
That's really cool to hear. I love my native Snowflake storage because everything's managed, everything's fast, but Iceberg is on par. Of course, there are technical differences, but we can expect great performance. And if you're already storing your Parquet files on cloud, there's no extra cost for storage. Same would be with the external tables in on-prem that we were discussing earlier. Now to start closing, I see here how to get started with Apache Iceberg and where people should go next.
Yes. If you want to get started in the Iceberg project and learning about Iceberg and the Iceberg community, go to the Iceberg website. There's Slack channels, there's email lists, there's documentation, there's links to blogs and recorded videos. Great place of information. If you want to get started with Iceberg support in Snowflake, we have a getting started guide. Both external tables and Snowflake native tables are in private preview, so reach out to your account team. We are working as quickly as possible to get them into public preview because interest in this is overwhelming, to say the least.
Yes. I also want to link people to your Twitter and your LinkedIn because you're always sharing very interesting sites, comparisons. On Twitter, you are Chimerasaurus.
That I am.
Yes.
And on Twitter or on LinkedIn, I'm James Malone.
James Malone. So much professional. But I love how much you are sharing there. You also have this great video with Ryan Blue, one of
I
the
do.
co-creators of Apache Iceberg.
Mhm.
So you can watch that on demand on our Snowflake page. We have the demo. And we have more interesting questions. For example, Abdullah wants to know if things need to be accessed as an external stage. And I think these are two great pages. Again,
Yeah.
they show the difference, which you need to pay attention to. Is this an external table with on Apache Iceberg, or is this an mm, native Iceberg table on Snowflake? And Satine is asking for the Slack channel for Iceberg. I think we can just go to the Apache Iceberg
Yeah, if you go to
community page.
iceberg.apache.org, I think even the
Mm,
front page has a link to their Slack.
exactly. Yes. Any other closing point? Of course, people can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter as Felipe Hoffa, and we have our Snowflake great handles both on Twitter and LinkedIn. Any closing remarks for our more than 300 people still with us here?
I mean, I just want to say thank you to everyone. My team and I, customer interest and customer feedback is what we design around. We always want to design around customers. So for everybody who's given us feedback, everybody who has helped us make our products better, I just want to say thank you because you help us design products for you, and it's a collaborative relationship. So thank you.
I love it. Customer first, users first.
Always.
They are here with us. They are interested. They are ready to give us their feedback. And I'm super glad we had this time to connect, James.
Likewise.
Hopefully, I'll see a lot of you soon.
Yes,
Let's play
likewise.
the dancing bear.
Bye,
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks.